Woohoo! Wednesday, folks. It's come round quick, hasn't it? It's bank holiday. Just like, oh, well, I'm a day out. I don't know about you guys. However, I am delighted that it is Wednesday and the sun is still out. So welcome to those of you on YouTube and to those of you listening on the podcast. It is Vicky Midwood here, the Alcohol Addiction and Disordered Eating Eliminator. I'm an integrative health, nutrition and lifestyle coach, and I've been sharing my story over the last couple of weeks, and this is part 3, folks. Some of you will have seen my post and listened to my last podcast, which was explaining my story about how I ended up in rehab and managed to put down alcohol. But the first part of my story is about kind of my journey with my food issues, and then you can kind of see how the alcohol took over. So I'm going to continue sort of where I left off, because it was the point of exams, and this is really poignant, because if anybody has got a niece or a nephew or a son or a daughter or a grandchild or whoever going through anorexia, the incidence of anorexia particularly over lockdown has been astronomical. The issue being coping with change, and the fact that there is so much uncertainty going on with exams. Now, for those of you who've done exams, and I know not everybody has sat the exams, but most of us have done some kind of testing or exams, whether it's GCSEs or it's O-levels, A-levels or whatever. And the pressure from different schools varies a lot. The pressure from different teachers of different subjects varies a lot. And how we respond to pressure and expectations very much dictates whether we kind of class ourselves as perfectionists or high achievers, or whether we're quite happy just doing our best. Now, that obviously comes down to your background and what you've heard from people around you, what you understand the expectations are from family members, and the kind of the world that you live in. And for me, expectations were very high, which I've already shared with you. From my family, yes, but from myself as well. I was a great believer that you know, I think I've shared this with you, that second just wasn't good enough. Nobody remembers who came second. So the expectations on me were to do well. Plus, for myself, I needed to prove to myself that I could do well. The problem being, when you start to mess around with your nutrition and what your body is actually taking on board, it affects how your brain functions. Now, not in a kind of, oh my God, your brain stops working sort of a way. It's not that drastic, but it's not working perhaps as effectively and efficiently as it could. And so when it came to do my O-levels, my eating really was in a mess. I was skipping breakfast. I was skipping lunch where possible at school. When you got to the last year, I took my O-levels at 15. I think I shared with you, because when my birthday fell, I started secondary school at 10, which meant I took my O-levels at 15. And I took actually a couple at 14, because I was put forward to take the Cambridge exam board, which was not the same board as the other O-levels. And it was my English and my maths teacher that decided I was ready to sit those exams. Now, again, pressure to do really, really well was on at 14 to sit your O-levels. Hi, whoever's listening, thank you. And so I really put pressure on myself. Now, the exam board, Cambridge board, is notoriously more challenging than the kind of the other board. I can't remember the name of it. So the expectations were there for me to do well. I did okay. I think I got a C in my maths, and I think I got a B in my English. And that kind of wasn't great in my book, but it gave me kind of the push, if you like, to really pull my finger out and do much, much better in what I call the actual O-levels. I saw it pretty much as a dummy run, and the fact that I've got 2 extra O-levels in English and maths, well, hey ho. I think I've got 14 O-levels altogether. Not that they mean anything in this day and age, but I took my exams, and I remember distinctly that, you know, at that point, the laxatives hadn't become a big part of what I was doing, thankfully. But I was living on half a pot of cottage cheese and a couple of celery sticks for lunch, if I ate lunch at all. And then I was eating dinner when I got home and throwing it up pretty much most days. So finally, my weight was starting to shift. Was I, and here's the thing that I don't think I've mentioned all the way through, was I massively overweight? Looking back at pictures of me now, I'd say the answer is no, I wasn't massively overweight. But in comparison, and here's the thing, and for those of you who are struggling with, as I say, with people with anorexia, you'll understand the comparison is so powerful, and it's just as powerful now as it ever was. And I don't know if it's more so because we've got social media and we've got Instagram and we've got Photoshop stuff. I'm going to suggest that it is worse now than it was for me. But when I looked at my best friends and saw, you know, when I used to look at particularly one of my friends, her arms seemed to be, you know, just teeny tiny, and my arms just seemed like twice the size. I don't know if they were, but that's how I felt. In terms of how much did I weigh, I think I was around about 9.5 stone at age 11 or 12. Now, I am the same height now. Am I? No, I'm an inch taller. So I was 5'4". I'm now 5'5" and a little bit. Don't forget a little bit. And I am 9.5 stone, give or take. I kind of fluctuate a bit above, a little bit below, mostly a bit above. So was I massively overweight? Well, in comparison to my friends, yeah, most of them were around about 7.5 stone. So in my head, I was huge, absolutely huge. When it came to shopping for clothes, I've already shared, I was going up into adult sizes and they were still in kid sizes. So I felt probably bigger than I actually was. And this is the thing. It's not about how you actually look. It's about how you feel. And in comparison to my friends, I felt huge. So I managed to get down to around about, I think about 8 stone by this point, by the time that I was taking my O-levels. Now, in my head, that was the figure that I was aiming for, because at the time, there was all of the supermodels were around, and there used to be magazines that would give you kind of the vital statistics. And I don't know if they still do that. I hope they don't. But they gave you the vital statistics of the supermodels, and, you know, 5'11", and they would be like 7 stone 5 or 7 stone 6 or maybe 8 stone. And so in my head, you know, I was aiming for around about 7.5 to 8 stone, because that's what the supermodels would come in at, and that's what I thought I needed and should weigh. And it was a struggle, and I was finding that me trying to diet and restrict the weight just wasn't going, because I couldn't do it. But if I was eating a little and then throwing up, suddenly those scales were starting to shift. Now, at the same time, I started on my crazy exercise regime, where I would get up at stupid o'clock in the morning. Now I still do, and it's gone a full circle, because when I was in the days of working in the restaurant and working in the bars and teaching classes all day long in the gym environment, I didn't get up and train like a lunatic first thing in the morning. But I do now get up at 4:45 every day, and one of the first part of my routine, the first couple of hours of my day, is for me to do what I need to do some reading, do a little bit of setting my intentions, and I do exercise first thing. It works for me. So it's quite funny that that's what I was doing back then, but not in a way that I was enjoying it. I was forcing myself in Huddersfield. It's massively hilly where we lived. And I would force myself to, first of all, run round the block, which was up a massive hill, back down and around in kind of a weird triangle-y square. And I'd do that twice. Then I would jump on my bike and I would cycle the same route twice. And I didn't do it every single day, but I did it as many mornings as I could. Now, by this point, my mum was we didn't know whether she was okay or not okay. Some days, and some days she was, some days she wasn't. Some days she'd be able to take us to school, some days she didn't. So we used to have a setup with a friend of mine who was at the same school, not in the same class as me, but she lived up the road and was passing our door every morning. So we had this thing where she would pick me up, take me to school. By this point, by the time I was doing my O-levels, my brother had left and gone on to secondary college. And so it was just me that they would pick up, and that was fine. Or alternatively, I would cycle to school until I had an accident, which is, I don't know if you can see that there, but it looks like somebody's drawn on my chin. I had an accident on my bike cycling to school. A big lorry came past too close and I did this, and they just resurfaced the road. So I've got a bit of gravel still in my chin. But anyway, or I would get the boss. And so I needed to make sure that I got my exercise in before I started school. And I remember the exams vividly. I remember we didn't have an exam room. Our school was tiny. It was an old house that was done up, an old Victorian house that was turned into a school. And so we didn't have a hall. We didn't have certain equipment. We used to go down to the technical college and they hired out a classroom. And it was a bizarre setup, but it was fun. And so we had this hall. It was a temperance hall that we used for our exams. And I remember standing outside, as you do, nervous as hell. And my stomach would just be making the most horrific growling sounds. And I'd be sat in the exams and it would be so quiet in that exam room. And suddenly it would just go, whoa. And I'd be like sat there thinking, oh my God, what are people thinking of me? And I don't know to this day. I think obviously hunger, but nerves too. And I remember that day in, day out, the stress and the anxiety and me wanting to eat and not eating and the pressure of the exams. Did it affect my overall results? Yeah, probably it did. And I came out with I think I got 3 A's and 7 B's. I took 10 in one go. No, I got 6 B's and I got 1 C. I remember being hacked off about the C. And one of the B's I thought should have been an A, but there you go. That's what I did. And so by that point then it was like exams are done, now what? Now fortunately for me at that stage I'd also got involved in the Huddersfield Thespians. For those of you who don't know what thespians are, amateur dramatics, right? I wanted to go into acting, I really did. And I remember, buying things like Time Out and thinking that I could go to auditions down in the London city because that was like the capital and how exciting would it be? Until I remember very distinctly my dad just turning around to me one day and saying, hey lass, you haven't got what it takes to be an actress. Focus on your studies, get married, meet a bloke, he'll take care of you. Oh my God, can you imagine in this day and age how that would go down? But that was the expectation that was around at the time. Don't forget, I'm talking about the early 80s. I took my O-levels in 82. And so that was kind of the aspiration for me as the female. I was so hacked off. He would take my brother golfing with him. I wanted to go. I was never given the opportunity unless I stomped my feet, made a big scene, and then he'd allow me to caddy and hold his bag. Very occasionally. My brother had golfing lessons. That pissed me off so much that he was allowed to go golfing lessons and I wasn't. When it came to work, I was roped in to go to work every Saturday, and I was from age 13 actually, because I explained that my dad had a shop. He had a number of shops by that point. He had 10, and one of them was a frozen food store. Think like Iceland before Iceland ever existed. So it was on a small scale, but he was into frozen food. He was the first person in the UK to bring microwaves into the country and sell them. So he was a bit of an entrepreneur, was my dad. I didn't know it at the time. But we had this frozen food stall, and we used to pack a lot of our own ready meals before ready meals were even a thing, right? My dad had that foresight, and I can remember packing fish chips and peas, and we get a plastic bag and we put 2 fillets of frozen fish. Then we'd have a sealer that would seal it, and then you'd put in the peas. There would be a line of peas, enough for 2. Seal that, make sure there wasn't too much air in it, and then we'd finish it, top it with the chips, and that was your ready meal packed by my fair hands. And so every Saturday I would work. I wouldn't get paid, and I was walking the dog, so I was getting paid for that. But that was kind of ongoing. And over the summer holidays, I got really involved in doing stuff with the Thespians, and I met a guy. So it's the very first time I kind of properly had a boyfriend. Now, interestingly, from being 13, I used to hang out with my brother's friends. I used to have more guy friends in my head than I did girlfriends around home. Not at school, but around home. And I don't know how my brother felt about me hanging about with him, but I did. And he never seemed to tell me to fuck off. So he must have been kind of okay with it. He was into brilliant music, and I loved his music, and so were his friends. And of course, some of his friends, well, they were all older, so some of them were drinking. It meant I would partake and feel like a part of. And so I kind of, met some of his friends and ended up having like crushes on them and all that kind of things. But I got a proper boyfriend who was in the Thespians, and that was kind of after my O-levels, so that was pretty good timing. And then it was like, okay, so my school did not have a sixth form college. So we had a sixth form, so we had to go to a separate college. And this is where all change. And this is kind of the point of this, is that I realized that, you know what, I didn't do changes in things very well. We moved house when I was 11, 12, and I hated it because I was really happy in the house next to the shop that I shared with you before. This was a big house that overstretched my dad. And in my head, believe it's up to you whether you believe this. I truly do believe houses have a feel, they have an energy. And it's no surprise that I've gone on and done things like Reiki, and I understand about energy healing and so forth, because the environment that you're in absolutely does have an energy. I know when I moved into my first house on the road that I live in now, which is not this house, that there was an energy in that house that I loved. And the house 2 doors down, exact same house, the energy was completely different. So I chose the first one. But there was an energy in that house that was not good, and it just wasn't a happy home. To me, it spelt the generation of my parents' marriage on a whole different degree, and there was just not a lot of happiness in that home at all. And so, then we moved from, obviously everybody does it, from infant school to secondary school, and that was a big wrench for me. I really struggled with that. I remember on the last day of infant school crying and said, can I stay here and teach the infants, because I don't want to go. I wanted to stay and be a teacher and not move on. Now, the reason that this is poignant is because anybody suffering from anorexia in particular, this fear of growing up, of things changing that you have no control over, but you have to do them anyway, and of you not knowing how you're going to be able to handle it and cope with it, is really, really important, because that is what is going through the heads of a lot of young people. Hi, Josie. That is what's going through the heads of a lot of young people right now in this whole COVID and exam situation. This whole unknown. They've been into college, or they haven't been into college. They've transitioned to university, or maybe they're going to, but they don't know what to expect because they haven't really been in college for the last year and a bit. The whole exam things has been different, and it must be horrific for them. And I know that I really struggled with this whole change thing. So here we were going again, change again to a secondary college where some of my friends were going to, but a lot of them weren't. In my school, it got a brilliant reputation. It brought people from outside town. So I lived in Huddersfield, people came from Dewsbury, people came from Leeds, even from Morley. And there were people from, kind of all over the place. And so this was an opportunity for them to maybe stay closer to home when they went on to secondary college. So all of my friends did not move to the same place. And that was, again, took me to a whole new level. I did not know which A levels to choose, and I didn't have any kind of guidance whatsoever. I wanted in my head, because my dad told me I couldn't be an actress, so in my head I wanted to be a vet, right? But obviously when I got my O-level results, I didn't get a good enough grade in physics and biology and chemistry to even pursue that. So that in my head, well, there's no point then doing it at A-level if I haven't got top marks in O-level. And so I was really confused as to what to pick. So I went for a really bizarre combination of English, drama, and social biology. Very weird. Nobody to guide me. Nobody said that's an odd combination, apart from my uncle, my mum's twin brother, who said, yeah, that's odd. But by that point, I'd already picked it. And as I say, I had no clue what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I was good at. And I always look to people who have got this idea of, this is exactly what I want to do, and this is what I'm striving for, and this is what I want to be, because I did not have that at all, not the foggiest. I didn't know what my talents were particularly. I didn't really know what I was good at, because I was trying to be good at everything. And that's poignant too for people who have issues with food, alcohol, disordered eating in any way, shape or form. There's this idea that you don't just want to be good, you want to be good at everything in all areas of life. Not just do you want to be good, but you also want to be better than others. And this is the air of arrogancy and grandiosity that I absolutely had, even though inside I didn't feel like that. And I shared that in the last one, and it's so true. And a lot of people who are struggling with, as I say, with anorexia, are going through that. So when I went to secondary college, my eating then took on a whole new level. As I've said in the last one, I discovered laxatives, and I got this boyfriend, and looking back, I was not that nice. I don't think. I'm pretty sure that I wasn't. He used to hack me off because his language wasn't very good. It wasn't very intelligent, but it was funny. Was he particularly good looking? Well, he was tall, he was blonde haired. You know, yeah, he had a good body and all that kind of stuff. He sort of ticked the boxes, but he wasn't the brightest button in the box. And we took him away on holiday with us when I was 16, and that's and I'm going to digress again then. So I decided that I was not going to lose my virginity until it was legal, until I was 16, and we went out. It was on my 16th birthday. We went out to a restaurant, and he pissed me off because he hadn't been out to restaurants. Not his fault, right? His parents couldn't afford to, but because I was in the food world and restaurants were very much part of what I did, I got a job in a restaurant when I was 14. So I was very much into the whole food side of things, and I understood about, you know, decent food and what food should taste like. And bless, he didn't know which knife and fork to use. He didn't know how to eat certain things, and hey ho. But I got plastered. I had enough to drink to be able to lose my virginity. And when it came to me getting sober, that was one of the biggest things. Was I had never, not once in my life, ever had sex sober. So when I lost my virginity, I was drunk, and I came sober at 35. So for all that time, not once had I had sex sober. That's quite a scary thing when you're in rehab and you kind of bring that stuff back to the forefront of your brain. It's like, shit. Yeah, that's anyway. So that happened, and it was kind of fun. I was doing the thespians. I was at college. It was a different environment, but I got into this routine now where black coffee was what I drank in the morning. I took a flask of black coffee. That was my break drink. That was my lunchtime drink. Basically, I was living on coffee. Was I smoking at that point? I think I was. I think I was smoking a little bit, not a lot. And yeah, so I was a smoker. I was a drinker of coffee, big time. And I wasn't doing brilliant at all, because I would walk the dogs. I would sometimes eat before I walked the dogs. And if I felt I couldn't get away with throwing up, I would actually throw up in a field. My life was starting to revolve around food, planning binges, and when my parents went out, I wanted to know what time they were going out, when they would be back, so that I could plan my binges. And I would go shoplifting on a Saturday to Marks and Spencer's, and yeah, hands up, I did it a lot. How the hell I didn't get caught more times than I did, and I did get caught. I do not know, but I used to steal stuff to binge on. While my parents were out on a Friday night or a Saturday night. And those binges were just like epic. I mean, just everything that you could think of. Pizza, quiches, pastries, whole sponge puddings, pints of custard, ice cream, just everything. And I would spend hours eating it, throwing up, eating more, throwing it up, eating more, throwing it up. And then just to make sure that I got rid of it all, I would take the laxatives. And looking back now, it's, you know, when I do look back, it's just like crazy. But I was planning it. I was looking forward to it. And that's what I did for a long time. I'm talking on a weekly basis for over a year plus. This went on. And it was that second summer, I remember there was a girl in college who was singled out because from the first summer holidays that we had, she came back and she just disappeared. She was quite a big girl when we broke up for summer, and we came back from the summer holidays and she'd lost about 3 stone. And I mean, she looked almost skeletal. She was probably about 7 stone, maybe 6.5 stone. And in my head, I was going, oh shit, I want to be thinner than you. I need to do this. I need to up my game. That is again about me feeling less than and want to be better than somebody else. And this is a theme that kept running through. And so I was like, okay, so I need to up the game with what I'm doing with my laxatives. I need to make sure that I'm not eating anything at all that is going to stay in my system. And that's pretty much what I tried to do. I was really fortunate in the thespians, so they gave me a lot of training and a lot of help, and I actually auditioned to go to Manchester Youth Theatre. And by the summer, I got in. So I was 17, and I got accepted. Now, by this point, my dad had left and met my stepmom. That's a whole other story, which I'm not going to go into massive detail about that. But he told me at 14 that he met somebody else, and he stayed with my mum basically for 2 years until he could afford to buy a house with the lady who was my stepmom. And I mean, I love my stepmom to bits, and she was really good for my dad. But I hated my dad for what he was doing to my mum, and I hated him even more that he told me that he had found somebody else who he was in love with, and yet here we were, he was making this pretense that he was caring about my mum when she went into hospital and all this kind of shit. And it was so fucked up when I look back. You don't tell your 14-year-old that you're in love with somebody else. I mean, it's just bonkers. But that's what he did, because he didn't have anybody else, I guess, to turn to. And so I was holding that secret for a long time and feeling shitty about it. So I got into Manchester Youth Theatre, and that really enabled me to not eat at all, because nobody was watching me. We were in halls. I could pretend that I'd eaten when I hadn't, and I could legitimately get hammered because they had the on-site student bar, and I remember gold labels were on special offer at like 40p, and I would get like 6 in a night and not eat because, well, there's calories in alcohol, right? And so when I came back from Manchester Youth Theatre, I was seriously, in danger of looking horrible. I was around about 6 stone, I think, by that point. And so I was kind of achieving my goal to be thinner than this other girl. But no, it was the summer holidays. Nobody was able to see me. And that's the point where I was losing, and I was taking laxatives, and I was stealing laxatives then because I couldn't afford to buy them. And when I say taking laxatives, I'm talking about taking 2 packets in a day, not just 2 tablets, 2 whole packets, to the point where I would have accidents. And in my bed, I would literally have to wrap a towel around me in case I leaked on the bedclothes and the mattress. I mean, that's ridiculous. If I couldn't make it to the bathroom, I'd have a plastic bin liner in my little bin in my bedroom, and I'd use that, and then have to empty out my own crap in the morning. I mean, it's just bonkers, the stuff that I actually did do. But that's how crazy it was. And so when my parents realized that I got an issue with laxatives, that's when I was finally taken to the doctor, and I got a diagnosis of bulimia. And that's when my dad wanted to force feed me, and I can distinctly remember him holding me by the throat over the dining room table, trying to shove food into my mouth. I mean, that is not how you handle disordered eating, but he didn't know how to cope with it. He was with my mum, who is mentally not great. She was manic depressive. Sometimes she was really down. Sometimes she was crazy manic. Got a daughter who wouldn't freaking well eat. He couldn't move in with this woman who he wanted to spend his life with. It was all a complete mess. And I guess he just didn't know how to handle this stuff. It was just like, well, just bloody eat. And it's like, you don't get it. Although, to be fair, when I got assigned a therapist who was supposed to be a specialist in bulimia, don't forget, this is very early on when bulimia was like so new. And it was over in Leeds, and to be fair, they didn't really know what they were doing, to be quite honest, in the nicest possible way. It was so new, and disordered eating therapy was kind of in the dark ages back then. So I didn't have a great experience with that. Plus also I'd been to a lot of psychotherapists with my mum because I wanted to know what was wrong with her. I wanted to listen to what they had to say. I also didn't want to bamboozle my mum and tell her shit that she didn't understand. So often I would insist that I would go into the psychiatrist meetings with her. I mean, they probably thought I was a little shit, but I'm so glad that I did. Like, sort of at 15 years old, I'm sitting there and I'm asking questions that my mum would never dream to ask, because I want to know this stuff, but I also needed to know how I could help her and, you know, make it easier for her. But I also understood what they wanted to hear and how they kind of worked. And so, you know, I'd be having therapy and I would just be like saying what I thought they wanted to hear, and it seemed to do the job. Right. So I didn't get much help with that. But when I came back from the youth theatre, and I was still losing, and I got to sort of, you know, under 6 stone, and then it was closer to 5.5 stone, and then I started to panic because I'd gotten to the point where I managed to reduce the laxatives. I wasn't completely off them, but I'd reduced them, and I was kind of scared, because I remember waking up one day and I was really dry mouthed, woke up, drank 2 or 3 gulps of water, and literally projectile vomited. It just came straight back up. And I went to the kitchen, and I remember making a coffee and trying to have a couple of mouthfuls of that, and that came back up. And then I thought, oh, I'll just have another glass of water, or I'll sip it slowly. And I couldn't keep anything down. And I knew then that this was like, this is dire. And I was, around about 5.5 stone at that point. And that's when kind of my uncle said to my mum, because my dad had finally told her that he was going to move in with somebody else, and he was leaving, and they moved home and all this kind of stuff. And he did actually move into the house, and he wanted me and my brother to move with him. And I was in such a dilemma as to what to do and where to go. We did move in, then we moved out, and then we moved back. So I was back with my mum. I was 17. I'd been to Manchester Youth Theatre. I'd lost all of this weight. And basically he said, if you don't do something, I will put you into hospital. Now, I didn't know then what the system was, but I believed his threat, because I knew that he knew people. I had a lot of connections everywhere, and I knew that he could pull strings if he needed to. And he would have made a few phone calls, and he would have got me in. I've no doubt about that whatsoever. But was I going to let anybody force feed me? Fuck that. No, I was not going to allow anybody to stick tubes in me or shove food down my throat. Now, my uncle needed to step in and help out my mum. She needed a break. The whole divorce thing, the papers had gone through, and she'd basically fallen apart. She'd come out of hospital yet again. And I and my mum went on holiday with my uncle and his family and my cousins. And basically, I had to ask my dad if I could go with my mum, because I didn't really want her to be going away on her own. And he basically said, here's your ultimatum. If you haven't put weight on when you come back, I will force you into a hospital. And that kind of was the push, if you like, that I needed. So I went away on this holiday, and I was, for the first few days, I was just like, I can't eat any more than I am. I can't stop this behavior. But also I was scared. I was also really scared because I didn't know how. I didn't know how to eat. I didn't know how to keep food inside me for any length of time. I just hadn't done it for so long. And so I started off by trying seafood and salad and not going straight into the bathroom afterwards. Fortunately, we're going out with family, so people would see if I went straight into the ladies' room after a meal, and I'd had to sit with that discomfort. And it was hard. It was so hard to do. But I kept doing it, and I kept trying. And I can't explain the pain that I felt keeping stuff inside. Physically, I remember I tried to eat a peach, and I think I had half of a cookie or something. And I was in the villa, because my uncle had a villa. And I remember the pain and sitting there and literally holding my stomach, rocking forwards and backwards. And then this kind of wave of cramp hit. And I remember going onto the floor and just rolling around in tears because of the pain, but also telling myself that I had to go through this if I wanted to come out the other side. Now I'm going to fast forward, because I did do it. And of course, when I came back, I had put on a little bit of weight. The problem was, at that point then, I didn't know what was normal. I didn't know when to stop eating. I didn't know what was okay, what was a portion. I was eating quite quickly, the same speed that I would binge eat, which was not cool for digestion. Little did I know that then. And fast forward to me putting on weight and people saying, oh, you do look well. If anybody who's struggling with eating disorder, especially anorexia, please, for God's sake, don't tell them they look well, because in your head that just equals you look fat. And so that's what I thought. And then it was like I hit the fuck it button and just went, well, if I'm going to be fat, I'm going to be fat. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do. I literally panicked when I came back from that holiday. I hadn't applied to do anything after my A-levels. I didn't do well in my A-levels at all. obviously I wasn't enjoying the subjects. I was absent a lot because, as I explained last time, I'd go into town on these mega lunchtime binges and I'd just miss afternoon lectures completely. Or I'd be in and out of the lesson so many times to the bathroom because of the laxatives that I didn't really pick up what was going on anyway. So I did abysmal in my A-levels, and that's the first time in my life where I've felt that I've done absolutely shite. But also part of me was making excuses like, well, you didn't really pick the subjects that you wanted to do anyway. And so I decided in my wisdom, very last minute, like September, and college starts in October, to decide that I was going to become a beauty therapist, because all of my friends were going off and doing stuff and I hadn't got a clue what to do. And it was like I went into the library, we didn't have anything else then, and I kind of went, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, what shall I pick? And I got into Chichester College to do beauty therapy. And it was like, my uncle had a house in Worthing, Angmering-on-Sea, which was not a million miles away. And he said, well, you can stay with me till you find somewhere and start your college course at the beginning of October, in September, beginning of October. So I went and I did this, but I was so unhappy and so confused about who I was, what I was doing. I was leaving my mum. My dad was now ensconced with my stepmom, and so was my brother. My mum was on her own. We'd had this nice holiday with my uncle. I was staying with them. I was traveling to college, and I didn't know what the fudge I was doing. I was not confident. I was putting on weight. I felt huge. My eating was crazy. Sometimes I was binging and keeping it down. Sometimes I was binging and not. I was just like throwing up still. I found a house with somebody, rented a room, and she was a bizarre lady. But I was still shoplifting, but sweet stuff. And I would literally get kiddie sweets and from the corner shop and sit in my room. And I remember distinctly this craziness. And I know now that it's all to do with the fact that I'd fucked up my gut. My leaky gut was absolutely having a ball. But my thyroid now was just like out of kilter. And I had no clue that's what it was. I just knew that my temperature was all over the freaking show. And I couldn't understand why I was overheating so much one minute, and then I would be like freezing cold the next. And I thought something seriously wrong with me. I was doing crap in the course. I didn't enjoy it. The whole waxing people and hairs and all of that, I hated. I did enjoy the reflexology side of things and thought that's what I wanted to do, but I was just like, I need to jack this in. This is not working for me. So I went back to Huddersfield. My dad gave me a job working in his office to upload his computer systems, and that was my first time of being on a computer. So at 17 and a half, I am on a computer, the old school, where it's like, huge, and the sound that the fan made so it didn't overheat. Every single frozen food item and item in his shops had to be put in by hand. Guess whose job that was? Yep. So, but I also had applied for a job in a bar. And by that point, I was now, take this in for a second, I was 5.5 stone, around about. That's the last time I weighed myself. Remember, that's what it was at 17. That summer of me being 17 and a half, 3/4. My birthday's in January. And then by the November/December, I was 11.5 stone. Compute that. That's a serious amount of weight that went on in a crazy short amount of time. And I had no clue how to handle it. I didn't know what to do. My clothes, it would I drew the line at size 14 clothes. I'd been wearing kids size, like age 13 and 14. And now suddenly I was in an adult and having to buy 14 elasticated waist. And I would literally look like a sack of potatoes because I didn't want to show anything. So nothing was fitted, nothing would tuck in. I would like wear sweatshirts that were no shape whatsoever. And like this long black flowing skirt that was elasticated waist. And just felt horrific. But you know what? I applied for this bar job. And I knew that on the interview, even I wouldn't hire me because I look like a sack of potatoes. But I gave them the answers that they wanted. And They told me that I'd been unsuccessful. God, I was pissed off. So I'm sitting in this office doing this horrible job. And I decided that in my wisdom, I'd also apply to become, I'd apply to do business studies for the following year at the uni. So I just needed to fill that year doing something. And I actually got a phone call that said, this is probably around about the February, March, that this new diner that I'd applied for ages ago was now ready to open. And actually they were short-staffed. Would I still be interested? Did I still want a job? And I was like, oh my God, okay, yeah, let's do this. And it wasn't going to be open until I think May or June of that year, but they were kind of getting the staff ready and there was a whole manual that you needed to learn. And I was like, okay, yeah, let's do this. So I booked myself a holiday. And in my head, I was going to go on this holiday, lose a load of weight in 2 weeks, come back and do this training. And it's kind of what I did. But while I was away on holiday, it was in 1830s, and it's the very first time I went on 1830s. So obviously I booked it when I was 18 and paid for it myself. I'd saved up all my dog walking money so I could afford. And I'd also been working in the restaurant, as I shared with you. So I'd got quite a bit saved and I could afford a holiday myself. And I was dead chuffed that I could buy my own, pay for my own holiday. I didn't have to ask my parents for anything, including I could buy my own clothes. I had my own spending money and I, kind of got myself sorted. And while I was away, I literally went back to what I'd done before. I ate melon during the day. I ate a salad, a Greek salad, starter size. That was it. And I drank, but not stupid, interestingly. A lot of them went crazy and I didn't go. I mean, I did like get pretty hammered most nights, but not bonkers, so not to the point of throwing up and stuff. And I was that classic 80s, 30s kid. I literally, I think I slept with around 7 guys in 14 nights and didn't give a shit because that's how much I didn't really care about me. The fact that people wanted to sleep with me in my head was a boost to my ego because in my head that meant that they found me attractive. When I look back now, it's like, and I was justifying it saying, why should girls be thought of as sluts? How about we use guys just as much as they use us? And that was my justification. And to an extent, I still stand by that, to be honest. But yeah, so I got offered this job, and so when I came back, I'd managed to lose. I was down to 9 stone. And so I'd lost a significant amount of weight. Obviously, I booked the holiday and I was trying to do something before then. I didn't go from 11.5 to 7 to 9.5, just like that. But when I look at the picture of the day that I flew out there and I look at the pictures of me when I came back, it was, there was a big, big difference. And when I came back, obviously, I wanted to keep the momentum going. And so guess what? I went back to my old behaviors. I went back to my bulimia. And by this point, my mum had moved. She'd sold her house, and I had to move back in with my stepdad and my stepmum. Now, my stepdad and stepmum had thrown me out when I was in the midst of my really kind of bad phase with my food and stuff, because I was a bad influence on my stepsister. So through A levels, it was really confused. I was with them, I wasn't with them. My mum was in hospital, she wasn't. I was sometimes in the house on my own, and it's quite a big house to be in on your own. But you know what? I was back with them, and it was like, I'm just going to work. And so I was in the restaurant, and then I got offered this gig in the bar. And so I kept losing the weight and I kept losing the weight. And I enjoyed this bar work so, so much. And I was bloody good at it. We had to learn cocktails, and they gave us a manual of cocktails. I think it was like something like 50 cocktails in this thing. And I learned them off by heart, and I did. I still remember some of them. But I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And that's where I met my first husband. So at 18, nearly 19, I met him in this bar. And I was losing weight. I think I was back down to about 8 stone by this point, and still dropping, maybe more, maybe a 7.5 stone, I think. And people were starting to notice me because I was good behind the bar. I got offered a full-time job to be manager of it. And I was still inputting flipping information in a computer. And I wanted to start this course. So I'd started my business studies course in the September of that year. And I met this guy. Apparently, when he saw me, he said to his friend, she's going to be my next wife. And I was. But not until I was 21. So I'm going to leave it there. for this part. I hope you're enjoying my story. I'm trying not to ramble, but stuff, when you start talking about it, it just pops back into your head. But if you've taken away anything from this, folks, change is something that I am absolutely now embrace and delight in, because I understand that no one can grow, no one can move forward, no one can be who they need to be without embracing change. And change will happen whether you like it or not. So better to embrace it than try and hide away and pretend it's not happening. And if you are struggling, or if you're in a home where there is somebody who is struggling with their food or alcohol, then please do get them to say hi to me. I'm more than happy to have a conversation with anybody who feels ashamed, who feels that they've identified with some of the stuff that I've shared with you today. You know, the craziness around food is bonkers. When I was binging, I would eat stuff out of bins. You know, I would chew it, I would spit it out, and then I would eat the spat out stuff and swallow it and then throw it up. But I mean, when you look at it, it's bonkers. And the reason I'm saying that is not to gross you out, but I want to say that if you are somebody who's done something like that, you're not on your own. Right? I've done it, and there is other people who have done it as well. And don't judge yourself by it. But if you're ready to get some help, do seek out somebody who can absolutely help you in a way that is understanding, but gives you the tools that you need to be able to cope with the stuff that you're turning to food to help you to cope with. And I'm going to leave it there. Have a lovely woohoo sunny Wednesday, folks, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.